Thank you for visiting the YouTube channel for bestbiblecommentaries.com. In this video, I'd like to show you one of the best reviewed volumes on the book of Ephesians. Before I do, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this channel so you can see videos on Bible commentaries, study Bibles, and other resources that help people understand God's Word. Scholar Harold Hoehner is the author of Ephesians, an exegetical commentary. This commentary is a standalone commentary, meaning it's not part of any series. It was published in 2002, and it is 930 pages in length for Ephesians, which is 6 chapters long. Hoehner wrote 930 pages for the book of Ephesians. Hoehner was a longtime professor at Dallas Theological Seminary. He taught there for over 40 years, and he passed away in 2009. This commentary was originally part of two other commentary series. The first was discontinued, and the second, not surprisingly, didn't quite have enough room for a 930-page commentary on the book of Ephesians, but thankfully Baker Academic decided to publish the volume as a standalone. One of the reasons why this commentary is well reviewed is because of the introduction. There is a 130-page introduction, and about half of it, about 60 pages of it, is Hoehner's defense of Pauline authorship. So if you're not aware, there are many critical scholars who will argue that Paul did not write the book of Ephesians. Hoehner argues in 60 pages that Paul did write the book of Ephesians. And I want to show you an example of that because I think it's just a good example of the depth Hoehner goes to in making his arguments in this commentary. So I want to show you this chart. But first, on this side, what Hoehner says, he's citing a critical scholar, a well-known critical scholar who's trying to make a case that Paul didn't write the book of Ephesians. And he says at one point, 80% of scholars on Ephesians don't believe Paul wrote the book. And so Harold Hoehner is going to interact with that percentage, 80%. So what he does on this chart is he lists all Ephesians commentaries going back to 1519 in 3 columns. So there's 4 Pauline authorship, uncertain, and against Pauline authorship. So Luther, Calvin are among the first listed. Look at this. 16th century, 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, 20th century. Here's some modern names starting to appear. Clint Arnold's commentary on Ephesians, which is really well reviewed. And then some other modern ones, Peter O'Brien, Mark Holmes. And so his conclusion after reviewing this chart, after putting all this information together, it's not even close to 80%. He says it's closer to 50%, but that's if you take a small window of critical scholars. And what Hoehner ends up concluding is denying Pauline authorship of Ephesians is actually just a trend among critical scholars. So this is just an example of the depth Hoehner goes into in his research and his presentation in this commentary to make his case on various issues. I mean, this is just an incredible amount of research to answer this critical scholar, and this is only on page 8 and 9 of the commentary, but it's just a good example of what's to come in the rest of the 930 pages. So let me show you an example in the commentary itself, just outside of the introduction, and I'll show an example from Ephesians chapter 2. Each passage of the commentary begins with an introduction, and there is a bold outline throughout the passage. So unlike other commentaries, the outline might not be that helpful to those in ministry. I think Hoehner's outline would be helpful to people in ministry. So here's an example. Ephesians 2, 1 through 3. The old condition, dead to God. A, condition described. B, condition delineated. And so even right there, you can see there's a little bit of alliteration there, and it's easy to follow. And I just think his outline might be helpful to those who are preaching and teaching through the book of Ephesians. As far as the comments themselves, the chapter and verse, as well as the Greek, is in bold, and that's followed by an English translation in quotation marks, and then the commentary. And again, the next Greek phrase in bold, followed by the English translation in quotations, and then the commentary. This is a technical commentary. So there's Greek, there's discussion of the Greek, there's Greek characters in the main body of the text, Greek letters in the main body of the text. I would say that it's quite accessible for being a technical commentary, and I think pastors would do fine with it. I think that even pastors whose Greek is not as sharp would still do okay with this commentary and find all sorts of things to take away from it. But the amount of depth in certain places, in most places, is just staggering. One of the reviewers on the back, Max Turner, put it very well. He says, "This is quite simply the most massive and meticulously detailed commentary on Ephesians to date." He says virtually every textual, lexical, grammatical, semantic, and historical issue has been scrutinized. And I had a thought, just more of a funny thought than anything else. I had a thought that the only way that Harold Hoehner could provide more depth with his commentary is if he started commenting on every single Greek letter, not word or phrase, every single Greek letter. Actually, I'm sure there are places where he comments on a letter, so I shouldn't be joke about that too much. But that just gives you an idea of the depth that he goes into with this commentary. A couple of example passages that I'll point out, Ephesians 1, 4, and 5, which says, "For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love he predestined us to be adopted as his sons through Jesus Christ in accordance with his pleasure and will." So I think that's a good passage to turn to when considering a commentary on Ephesians and just learning, what does the author say about this particular verses. So the first thing to note is that Harold Hoehner provides an 8 to 9 page essay on the word election as he's commenting on these verses. He's commenting on the history of the Greek word, and he's also commenting on some modern scholars, what a few modern scholars say about that particular word. His conclusion is that he says, in conclusion, it means that one's destiny is determined beforehand. So now this is kind of a conclusion on the section, which involves the idea of being chosen by God and also predestined. He says, in conclusion, it means that one's destiny is determined beforehand. The active voice indicates that God did it. It is interesting to notice that both the choosing and predetermining are governed by, quote unquote, before. God did these things before the creation of the earth. So that gives you an example of his commentary on the ideas of chosenness and predestination in Ephesians 1, 4, and 5. The other example that I like to look at is Ephesians 5, 22 and 23, because the marriage passage, which is, Ephesians 5:21, submit to one another, and then wives, submit to your husbands, and then husbands, love your wives. Okay, that particular passage can be kind of telling where an author is coming from when you look at that. So he says in this section, he says, again, it needs to be restated that the headship of the husband does not connote any sense of qualitative superiority to the wife. In social psychology, the husband's rule over the wife is called positional power, a power by virtue of one's position. In God's administration, the role of the husband's headship is positional power. His headship and the wife's submission are for the sake of harmony. Okay, another sentence. Paul's injunction of a wife's submission to the husband as the head of the family confronts the family structure of that day. Paul states that the husband, not the father, has the authority over the wife, and consequently, he is head of the new family. So that's an example of Hoehner's teaching on the marriage passage in Ephesians chapter 5. So I hope those examples are helpful to you. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it's been helpful in learning more about this particular volume. Thank you. I'll put some more information in the description box down below. Thank you for visiting bestbiblecommentaries.com.